Well, today is once again going to be a completely different type of video because that's what I do on this channel. But to give an actual explanation, I'm currently in film school, and a lot of the videos I make for this channel have been inspired by assignments I've gotten for class, and this video is no different than that. I'm currently in a directing class where my assignment this month was to choose a director and just completely absorb yourself into all of their work, and we're studying the concept of auteur theory, and so I chose to do my project on Guillermo Del Toro. Guillermo Del Toro is a visionary director who has created his unique style by leaning into his whimsical creations and honing his childlike perspective and fantastical style in everything that he does. Every movie that he makes has this element of whimsy to it that just makes you feel like you're in our world, but not quite.
Guillermo del Toro Gomez was born in Guadalajara, Mexico in 1964 to his father Federico, a wealthy businessman, and his mother Guadalupe, an amateur poet. They raised their son in a strict Catholic household, but young Guillermo quickly developed a taste for the macabre.
Guillermo's dad, Federico, won the lottery, and with his winnings, he bought books, including several sets of medical and art encyclopedias. And Guillermo fell in love with that blend of fantasy and fact. I read them eagerly, and the idea of art and anatomy and biology became fused into one. So Guillermo started drawing supernatural beasts.
The carcass of a creature confirms the existence of a living specimen. In the same way, I think monsters confirm the otherness.
He taught himself English by reading Fright magazines, experimented with fake blood and movie makeup, and raised dozens of snakes, rats, and other creepy crawlies in his family's mansion. He devoured horror of all kinds, but his obsession focused on one film in particular, Creature from the Black Lagoon and its grotesque Gillman. After shooting spooky short films with his father's Super 8 camera, Guillermo enrolled in film school, where he quickly learned that he'd have to create his own path to success. In 1985, Del Toro founded Necropia, Mexico's first dedicated special effects house, and made a name for himself in Mexico City's cinema scene. In 1993, Guillermo released Cronos, his first feature film, and his first of many collaborations with actor Ron Perlman. But just as he was poised to make his big studio debut, his family was faced with a tragedy that forced the director into exile. His father had been kidnapped. Bandits had snatched him from the streets of Guadalajara and were holding him for $1 million ransom. Del Toro had no way to meet the kidnappers' demands, but fate stepped in the form of none other than James Cameron. The two filmmakers became close friends while Del Toro was filming Cronos, and Cameron happily ponied up the dough to free Federico. But even after his father was released unharmed after 72 days in captivity, Del Toro no longer felt safe in the country he called home. He moved with his family to America, where he honed his craft and found his first taste of Hollywood success.
He is a true designer of worlds, using every aspect of the design to bring these worlds to life, from props to colors to production design. He has such a detailed eye and has such specific elements that he puts into each of his projects that are truly just from his mind, and it shows how much care he has for the projects he makes. Each creature he creates has a backstory and has a history to it, and the design of the creature is informed by that character's story. And so by looking at the creature, you're not only seeing this awesome, epic creature of giant proportions, but you're also getting to see that creature's history just in its design. In Pan's Labyrinth, the faun is built into the set the first time we see it. It is a part of the set and it comes to life. And that really symbolizes, along with the fact that the faun is a part of the labyrinth. The faun is the living maze. And it really adds to that creature's character and expands on the elements that are already there. I feel like part of the fun of Pan's Labyrinth is you get to decide for yourself how much of the fantasy you buy into and how much you think is actually a dream. And so I think the faun plays a really interesting part in that story. And the way the faun kind of teeters on the edge of, is this a fantasy or is this a nightmare? But yeah, the small aspects of these creatures like add to them as parts of the story, as it reveals a lot of their dual natures and how many of these monsters have been forced to be monsters because of who they were born as. And that is a big theme that is carried over in a lot of Guillermo Del Toro's works, is who is actually the monster. So in The Devil's Backbone, a 12-year-old whose father has died in the Spanish Civil War arrives at an ominous boys' orphanage where he discovers the school is haunted and has many dark secrets which he must uncover.
The Devil's Backbone is basically what I call my first film. You know, it's my third movie, but it's the first time I operate protected and cared for with Pedro Almodovar as producer. So I am able to bring that moving camera style that I started trying on Mimic, I bring it to maturity. It was not advice, it was a liberation. He basically said to me, you have the reins, you are protected, and we support you. And that was a huge change from Mimic. Blade 2 wanted to go first, and they were trying to push their way, and I said, if you want to take it away, but I need to do Devil's Backbone before I do Blade 2, because I need to be completely, again, in control as a director, and recuperate the certainty of being in control before I go and deal with a star and all the action and all the big production. And that was exactly the thing that healed me also. And I think the ghost in that movie is one of the best creations in terms of characters that I have done visually.
Anyway, one of the largest aspects of The Devil's Backbone is the ghost boy, Santi. And he always appears with this stream of red blood leaking out of his head and floating up into the air. It's very water and misty. And at the start of that movie, it's like, oh, weird, why is it doing that? But then you later find out that Santi was knocked over the head and shoved into the water and left to die. And so that's why his ghost appears the way it does. It has the blood of his wound seeping out into the water where he was left and forgotten about. Just from the first time we see Santi as a ghost, his entire story is right there, just from his character design. And we can pick up on a lot of the elements, but he is there to forcefully remind all the characters in the story of what happened and what they are ignoring. A lot of the times, ghosts are actually memories that are haunting characters. And that is just through the roof apparent in The Devil's Backbone, as not only is Santi lurking in the orphanage, reminding characters of the fact that he was killed, there's also this bomb that was planted in the center of the orphanage that fell from the sky the night that Santi was killed, but it landed in the dirt and never blew up. And ever since then, everyone in the orphanage has just ignored it. This bomb's presence can be felt throughout the entire movie the same way that Santi's presence can be felt, because Guillermo Del Toro, in his directing, does not let us forget that the bomb is there. The bomb frequently appears in the background of shots. It is a focal point of multiple scenes. Everyone interacts with this bomb and has a personal connection with this bomb. And their feelings towards the bomb are very clear metaphors for their feelings towards the murderer that is still living in their orphanage. I think that this is most apparent with Dr. Caceres. He's the one who claims that the bomb is dormant and that it no longer poses a threat to anyone. And that very much mirrors his relationship towards Jacinto, who we find out is the one who actually killed Santi. So by Dr. Caceres letting Jacinto still live in the orphanage and be around these kids, he's letting a bomb sit amongst them, which we see the consequences of at the end of the film when the bomb metaphorically blows up, because the person, Jacinto, literally kills all the adults and leaves the orphans to fend for themselves. Like, I will say the orphans fought back, they took him out, but they're still stranded at the end. And like, I feel like that's where this movie is very much a tragedy, and you could even view it as the bomb going off and literally, because that's what happened, is they ignored the bomb and it blew up and killed them all. But that's not what actually happened in the movie. They ignored Jacinto and he blew up and killed them all. Since the beginning of his career, he has utilized sound as a storytelling tool. His orchestral scores build up his fantastical landscapes, and his harsh realistic sound effects highlight the brutality of violence, and Del Toro himself often gets involved in the sound mix. He loves using orchestral music with a lot of big violins and grand pianos and building moments that are like, oh, but while the music does often build an intensity to these giant moments of the movies, he also knows when to pull it back and just strip it down to a bare, basic sound. Guillermo got his start making movies by himself at home, and these movies didn't have any soundtracks, and so he was forced to make a lot of the sounds himself, live, as the projector was showing what he had made. The most important thing for him is the story, and he knows how to use sound in a way that aids the story without distracting from it. He even goes so far as writing sound cues into his scripts as he is writing them. However, he knows not to overdo it. He knows that music can help convey an emotion of a scene, but he never lets it distract from the goal of the scene. In Pan's Labyrinth, a young girl discovers a mysterious labyrinth and meets a faun who sets her on a path to saving herself and her ailing mother. Ophelia's innocence is built on by the whimsical music. Every time we go to the labyrinth, we're greeted by this magical score. And this music allows the audience to transition into the fantasy world seamlessly, while also drawing attention to the parallels between the fantasy world and the real world. Ophelia's imagination is scored by beautiful violins and music, which contrasts the scenes of war and bloody violence.
Pan's Labyrinth represents a great fusion of everything I had learned in terms of tools and experiences in the movies that preceded it. Personally, it kind of articulated all the movies at the same time. It made them make sense. There was a certain exuberance in the worlds and in the monsters of Pan's Labyrinth that I couldn't have done before. There was the emotional depth of Devil's Backbone and the melancholy of Devil's Backbone and Kronos. And at the same time, there was the handling of effects and action that came from Blade and Hellboy. I was able to do set pieces with a lot more nimble camera work. It's almost like the first summation of what I have learned as a filmmaker, all put to the service of one of the most personal, if not the most personal movie. It ranks really high in that way. Pan's Labyrinth defines exactly where I was in my life at that moment, wondering if there was magic in the world. Not in a whimsical sense, but if the world was either terrible or beautiful or both at the same time, and the answer was both at the same time. The movie connected with an audience, and it still connects with an audience in a way that I think closely resembles the way I connected with movies when I was a cinephile.
As a child, Guillermo was heartbroken that the creature from the Black Lagoon couldn't end up with the girl. So when he grew up, Del Toro was able to give the Gill Man the happy ending he deserved.
If I told you about her, what would I say? That they lived happily ever after? I believe they did.
The Shape of Water is a haunting love story, a chilling Cold War allegory, and a good old-fashioned monster movie all in one. And despite the Academy's well-known bias against sci-fi and horror films, it snagged 4 well-deserved Oscars, including Best Director and Best Picture.
In The Shape of Water, a mute cleaning lady in a 1960s government lab discovers a secret non-human creature and forms a bond with it, risking everything to free it. The beautiful scores highlight the romantic and meaningful moments of this movie, but these harsh and dramatic stingers really emphasize the cruelness of the scientists and the reality of what's happening in the lab. Guillermo Del Toro is able to create musical contrast because he goes into creating his stories with music in mind.
In Del Toro's The Shape of Water, editor Sidney Wolinski discussed Guillermo and his pacing style. Wolinski said, "He's very specific about what he wants, and he moves through the camera all the time," close quote. Rather than having an abundance of footage for the editor to sort through, or the assistant editor to sort through, Guillermo is specific about the shots he takes, which gives the editor a chance to focus on the cut and pacing of the scene. He's very specific about letting the editor have free reign over the cut, interpreting the film in their own way, and then working together to write the film into the final version. It's important to remember that Del Toro's extensive catalog of films has very distinct styles and pacing when it comes to the editing. Often his fantasy-centered stories are drawn on, giving the audience the time to sit well with the story and the actor's performance. He is not rushing to complete the story. Each of his films is paced differently, but still maintains the melodic and slow burn to focus on the characters.
He crafts everything with a purpose, and he knows exactly where things need to be and where they don't need to be. And that's what really makes him an auteur, is his vision, his distinctness, his exactness. However, movies like Hellboy and Blade 2, the editing is a lot quicker, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The editing in Pan's Labyrinth isn't exactly going to be the same as the editing in Blade 2.
It was absolutely a blast. It's when I started to want to experience huge changes from one movie to the other. I really almost came to the system of not repeating the same movie consecutively. I wanted a huge change. If Devil's Wagon is chamber music, Blade 2 is black metal. And it goes to what I think is the essence of action movies, which is very close to the musical genre. You basically have musical numbers tied by a story that is very melancholic, a variation in the Frankenstein theme with the character of Luke Goss. I love being able to combine insane action and brutality with this sort of little tragic story. One of the things that fascinates me about Mike Mignola is that he combines blue-collar sensibility for Hellboy's job and at the same time a deep knowledge of mythology. It has very much a comedy undertone in the relationship between Abe Sapien and Liz and Hellboy. And it also has horror moments with Cronin and the Lovecraftian creature at the end. Rephrasing the comic, like Cronin is very different in the movie than Cronin in the comics. The relationship between Broom and Hellboy is infinitely more tender in the movie. And I've always been attracted to stories of fathers and sons. When I did Blade and I did Hellboy, it was sort of a counter to everything that was being done. It was a time in which superhero movies were not that dark, and I wanted to make them dark and make them adult. I loved the first Blade, and I thought I could add a layer of savagery.
He never wants to rush to tell a story, and so in stories like Pan's Labyrinth, he wants to slow us down and let us soak it in. But in projects like Hellboy, where there's so much story to pack into such a condensed period of time, the editing and pacing of the story is so much faster because that's what the story needs. Because even if his projects are these slow burn, fantastical masterpieces or these campy, funny, fast-paced action movies, the character is still at the heart of the project. And everything Guillermo Del Toro does is going to be in service of the character and telling that character's story the best way he can. At the beginning of Guillermo Del Toro's career, he didn't really feel like he had much control. He was making projects for studios and they were heavily involved in every aspect of production.
At least one good thing came out of shooting the sensual body horror film Mimic. It's where Guillermo met actor-contortionist Doug Jones, who would later portray Abe Sapien, the Fawn, and the Asset. Sadly, that's about the only bright spot of the production. Del Toro disowned the film after constant clashes with the producers.
The studio was so focused on the story and the characters changing, and it was so aggressive, but they allowed me to operate unchecked on the visual of the film. I'm incredibly proud of the way the movie feels and looks. Is where I started moving the camera in a way that became sort of my style, in a sense.
Then, when he made Pan's Labyrinth, he propelled his career forward by gaining acclaim for the fantasy worlds he could build. That movie really put him on the map in terms of what he could do when given budget and creative freedom. Still, it was not until The Shape of Water that Guillermo del Toro won 2 Oscars and finally gained acclaim from the Academy. With the careers spanning from action-packed comic book movies to touching horror romance creature features, Guillermo del Toro has created his own little world of projects where he truly envisions everything and makes every aspect of it his own. Even when telling stories that he feels aren't even his own stories, he makes them his own. I think it's interesting that he's even claimed that a lot of his movies are the same story told over and over again, because you can somewhat see that, but yet you can also see how each project is different and represents a different stage of that story. And he often tells Beauty and the Beast-esque stories of creatures being found and loved by princesses who don't quite belong in their world. And I find it really beautiful watching his movies and how consistently he shows basically the little weirdo finding their fellow little weirdo who loves them and accepts them for being what they are. And a lot of the times that's messy and it doesn't go quite right. It's hard to love someone 100% for who they are. But I think Del Toro's filmography shows that it's worth it to try. And it's worth it to work towards accepting someone for all of their flaws, because that's the only way you're ever going to truly love someone, is when you can learn to love them even for their monstrous aspects. Guillermo del Toro is truly a visionary, and that can be seen from the beginning of his career to where he is now. He knows the story he wants to tell, and he knows the world he wants to tell that story in, and he is willing to do whatever is necessary to accomplish that goal. Continuously, he has shown that he can create true works of art that transport us to these amazing, fantastical worlds, yet still mirror the harsh realities that we live in. And so, in my opinion, Guillermo del Toro is definitively an auteur of filmmaking.
The truth in our world, and what we need to understand, is that the horror is all too human. You have to fear the living more than the dead.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more content like this, please let me know. This is new and different from what I usually do, but I had a lot of fun making this. So if you want more, let me know and I'll try to work on more videos like this. I will still be doing reaction videos. I'm just trying to branch off into other styles of content as well.